about questions in just a minute, but I want to just formally welcome everybody to our Career and Licensure Panel this morning. We appreciate all of our panelists being here and students as well for all of your participation. So this panel was put together in response to both formal and informal student feedback that students are really wondering kind of how people have found their niche, how people have taken that next step after graduation. So this is one of the ways our program is looking to support students in that capacity. So we have 1 hour together and we have 8 awesome panelists. So we're going to jump in pretty quickly and kind of make sure to share the floor a bit, and I'll help moderate some of that as well. Betsy Davis is here, and she's our assistant director for both the Marriage and Family Therapy program, as well as the clinical rehabilitation and mental health counseling program. And so she's going to be helping to kind of let everybody into the room and also be watching for any student questions. So students, if you take a look at your event guide, I know that that was sent out, and all of the panelists, their bios are listed there. I know you've had a chance to review all of those, but they've all graciously agreed to have their contact information in that event guide. So that means that if there's just a burning question or some way that you'd like to reach out with one of the panelists after this presentation, you're more than welcome to do that using the contact information on that first page. We are going to be ending promptly at 1 to respect everybody's time, so I just wanted to make that announcement at the beginning. But during the presentation, students, please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. Betsy's going to be watching that and may interrupt our session to kind of ask those and facilitate that together with me, or she may save those for the end of the presentation and kind of panel discussion too. So with that, I'm going to give a bit of structure to our first part of the discussion today, if that's all right. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to do just a really brief intro, like 30 seconds to a minute, with your name, kind of the career that you're representing, and just a little snippet about your areas of expertise, if that would be all right. And then we'll move forward with questions. So Gwen, you are first on my screen. I'll ask you to go first.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Gwen Green. I am CEO at Tampa Crossroads. I'm also a licensed mental health counselor and certified addictions professional. So just super quick, I know I only have 30 seconds. I started out as an intern while I was in your department at Tampa Crossroads working on our women's program. I became licensed, I was a counselor, I was clinical director, and then 2 years ago I became CEO. I have a very small private practice. And in the past year, I purchased a CEU company called AA Ross Family Counseling. So we offer CEUs to Floridians seeking licensure or maintaining and renewing.
Wonderful, thank you. Lots of experience there. Allie, how about for you to go next?
Hi, I'm Allison Zangari. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've worked in residential treatment facilities. I've worked at USF Counseling Center and group practice, and now I'm in private practice. I'm also ICEFT EFT certified and an EFT supervisor in training. Work with addiction, eating disorders, BPD, high conflict, everything, you name it under the sun. Not much I don't, not much I'm not doing.
Wonderful, thank you, yes. And Monica.
Hi guys, I'm Monica Burton and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm in St. Petersburg and I specialize in working with couples. I've gone through all 3 levels of the Gottman method, and I'm also the past president of the Florida Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I have a YouTube channel and a podcast. That's all fun to do, but I primarily work with couples, affair recovery, high conflict, the tough cases, and I really like what I do.
That's great. That's the important thing, right? Is that we enjoy the work that we're doing. Okay, and Milton.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Milton Moss. I'm an area supervisor with the Florida Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and also heavily involved with the Life Center. And as we see, Tom Brown, my colleague from the Life Center, is here. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and a certified rehabilitation counselor. And my areas of expertise are helping persons with disabilities obtain and maintain employment, and grief and trauma counseling, which I work through the Life Center with. I'm certainly glad to be here.
Great, thank you very much. Valerie.
Yes, hi, I'm a licensed mental health counselor, marriage and family therapist, and I've trained pretty much in the private practice realm, and I work with folks who are suicidal, self-harming using dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. I've become board certified in DBT, and working with couples is another passion of mine, and I'm working on becoming certified eventually in emotionally focused therapy for that.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here. Let's see, Anna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Aluisy, and I am a licensed mental health counselor and marriage and family therapist in Tampa. I've had my practice for 10 years, and I specialize in working with multicultural relationships, and I also serve the Spanish-speaking and the Latino and Hispanic community here in Tampa. I have training in dialectic behavioral therapy on Gottman Level 3. I'm also the past president of the Suncoast Mental Health Counselors Association, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Great, thank you. Deborah, I think you unmuted yourself, so I'll have you go next if that's all right.
Sure. My name is Deborah McCarthy. Please forgive me. I am still commuting, so my camera is still off. I am the Director of Student Accessibility Services at USF. I've had that position for 13 years, so my expertise is in disabilities and higher education and how those two coordinate together.
Great, thank you. And Tom.
Tom Brown. I'm here at the Life Center of the Suncoast. I've been counseling for 40 years, over 40 years. I kind of like a Creole. I've done a little bit of everything. But right now I'm focusing pretty much with grief and trauma counseling, and I just enjoy that so much. And glad to have Milton aboard here on the same experience today. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. And I think that's wonderful. All of our panelists have just so much wealth of knowledge and information. So thank you for sharing that. I'm Lauren Baxley. I'm the assistant, or gosh, we changed our job titles now. I'm an instructor in the MFT program, and I do the field coordinating portion of that as well. So I'm working with some community partners to place our MFT students. But I'm really excited to be here and learn from all of you as well. We did send out kind of a survey, or we asked students sort of what they were really looking for and some additional questions to start with today. So I'm going to begin with those if that's all right. And I want you all to feel free to comment on any topics that you feel like you can speak to, but some of the questions are directed at particular people based on the bios that students received ahead of time. So one of them was for Milton. I'm wondering, what are some of the primary duties of a VR counselor, and what does a typical day look like?
Okay, well, I'm honored to be the first one to go. The typical duties of a VR counselor are first and foremost, like any counseling domain, to once you meet with the consumer, to build and develop that counseling relationship. Vocational rehabilitation counseling is like all of the other domains, that is the most important aspect, developing that relationship. Once that relationship is developed, then what happens is you will move in to the assessment part, figuring out the goal of vocational rehabilitation is to help the individuals obtain employment, meaningful employment, and to develop measurable skills gains. Training, in other words. So once you build that counseling relationship, what you will do is just do your assessments, both in-house and referring out to psychologists and medical professionals to help determine an appropriate vocational goal and or training. And then you will work with the consumer throughout the life of the case to help them achieve that goal. And the typical day of a vocational rehabilitation counselor is simply that, working and navigating the individual through all of the life challenges that face them and are obstacles to getting employment.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one of the other pieces too, and this is coming from me, what sorts of roles would graduates from our program be qualified for under the VR umbrella? Like particular job titles perhaps that they can be looking for?
Okay, under the VR umbrella, that certainly a graduate is eligible for vocational rehabilitation counselor. And strongly encourage people to contact me and let's talk some more if you're interested in this population. But what will happen is we have 3 levels of counselors in vocational rehabilitation: a regular vocational counselor, a senior counselor, and then a consultant. And so there's kind of like a promotion trajectory that is there. But yeah, so definitely a counselor and any of the positions under it, but with a degree as a counselor, certainly we want you to be a counselor.
Okay.
And I could take the whole hour talking about that, but I'm restraining myself.
Yes, thank you. I think it's helpful though to know that, you know, kind of that there's a promotion path sort of paved out too, as you know, they grow with their experience and moving forward in that realm, and what that looks like. So thank you very much. Okay, and then how about Monica? How did you decide to move into private practice? And then for all of you in private practice, I know that's a large, several of you are, just some of the challenges you all have faced in private practice in general.
So I decided to go into private practice, and just to be honest, I had a baby. But really before having a child, one of my goals and dreams was to get into private practice. So in graduate school, as I was kind of thinking about things, one of the things eventually that I wanted to do was to move into private practice. When I left graduate school, my first 2 jobs were in working for a nonprofit agency. I worked with juvenile sex offenders, and then from that job, I went in and I worked with school-age kids, creating prevention-based programs for parents and their, for families. So very extreme ends, but I really enjoyed both. And then I was kind of thinking about wanting to get into private practice, and eventually what I did is I actually joined someone's practice to start out. And I thought that that was a really great way to do it, so I could kind of learn the ropes first before I branched off on my own. So I worked with someone for I think about 3 years, and then made the leap, into private practice all on my own. And so that's kind of what I would recommend. And if you don't want to join someone's practice, you don't have to, but I definitely think having a group of colleagues that you can bounce ideas off of or talk to, because it is challenging at times, and a lot of times it can be kind of isolating. So to have a group of colleagues that you really trust is, I 100% recommend.
Great, thank you. That was one of the questions too that was sort of posed to all the private practice providers, is the pros and cons, when students are considering jumping into private practice. In general, would you all recommend joining a group practice or, with other providers, or what are the pros and cons of independently starting or joining a group? Allie?
Yeah, great question. Joining a group practice usually levies the financial fear that you have, right? So typically a group practice is going to offer you some sort of referral stream. Some of them even guarantee a salary when you start, that no matter if you don't have any clients yet, you will get a paycheck. And so that can be really reassuring and helpful, especially if you're trying to build your name in the community before you go straight into your own. The cons are obviously fee splitting, right? Or a salary, that your salary doesn't usually match an hourly rate. So you typically make more if you're in your own private practice, but you have to be hustling more or be more interested in marketing or getting your name out there or going to networking events. So it's definitely a little bit less of a financial gain to be in a group practice because you're either fee splitting some sort of percentage or getting a salary that's set regardless of how many clients. So there's like a pro con there in terms of trying to build your name versus the financial part of it.
That makes sense. And I think most of you shaking your head that the other private practice providers might agree with Allie's statement that, as a beginning, especially as a well-registered intern would have to do that, but beginning out, starting in a group comes with some benefits, but weighing out the financials.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Another alternative that I experienced when I first started my private practice as a registered intern was because of my networking and like knowing other providers, like coming together with 2 other counselors who were licensed and like splitting the office space. So we had like this office that had like a suite that had 3 individual offices, and that we all 3 of us signed the lease, and then that way it would really, minimize the leasing commitment that we made as each of us built our clientele.
And I just want to also add to what's already been said is whether you go in with a group or alone or as an intern, you want to create a profile on a website called Psychology Today. And you want to make sure your photo is professional, like not something that you'd use on a dating app or something. And you want to speak to the people, not just about your credentials, because they don't actually care about that as much as they care about, do you get them? So you want to really look at some profiles where someone's speaking to the consumer about what they might be struggling with, drawing them in that way. And that's been really helpful for me.
I wanted to quickly offer a couple of seconds here talking about my path, because I also have a very small, but I'm seeing clients as a private practice. And I graduated from USF in 2006. And at the time I did my practicums, internship, and licensure supervision, both at the Life Center and at Vocational Rehabilitation. And over the years, what happened is I have my job with Vocational Rehabilitation, which is a government job with all the pensions, insurance, and benefits that come with that. But I also have an incredible passion for grief and trauma in the Life Center. And so I've also continued working at the Life Center, everything from being on the board of directors to having a small private practice to doing volunteer groups to seeing volunteer clients. And I think professionally that did 2 things. One, the income and the benefits that are necessary coming from the government end, and to enhance my passions at the Life Center and giving back to the community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that's a great option. And I notice, some of you are also, you have either administrative, like Gwen, I see you raising your hand as well, and also do private practice sort of on the side. So I'd love to hear about that. And also one of the student questions as well is kind of how do you balance that, having a full-time job in, intense capacity, but then also having a private practice in addition to that. Tom, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Your question about a full-time job and a private practice. Before I went into full private practice, I had a fairly decent clientele. I had enough to cover me at least 1 full day. I did do private practice for 35 years. The last 5 years, I've been the executive director here at the Life Center. And it's a little bit different type of work. As a marriage and family therapist, I must say that I didn't get a whole lot of interest in private practice clientele until I got some gray hair. People would come in and they'd say to me, I looked, in my 30s. I had all dark hair. They'd come in to me and they'd say, "How old are you?" And I'd tell them. They'd say, "Well, what do you have to teach me about a couple's issues?" And so, it was a challenge there for quite some time. And what I did discover looking in hindsight, is that it really helped me in the private practice to have a really good grounding with some really good training. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for a number of years. And I also worked in an addictions facility for a number of years. Now, I found that was really good training and for me. And so I would encourage anyone as they're starting out not to jump into private practice right away. Because if you look like you're 25 years old and you're a licensed marriage and family therapist, I'm telling you, you might have a difficult time getting clients. Thanks for letting me share.
Well, thank you for sharing, Tom. And I think that there's definitely, I would agree, a lot of value in having a variety of experiences that you can bring to the table when you start your private practice. So whether that be a path of doing agency and getting those varied experiences at the beginning and jumping in, or kind of doing them simultaneously too. I think the great thing is that there's so many ways for students to find their way moving forward. Tom, I have a directed question for you in just a minute. I'm coming back. Gwen, I wanted to, is that okay? Gwen, I wanted to jump back. And one of the ones specifically for you is how you balance your responsibilities as a CEO and maintain your private practice. And have you ever run into issues kind of doing both?
It's tough. I think it's a great question, and it's tough for many of us who do balance. Yes, I have the role of CEO of a company, but I make it work because I love both so much. I really love the work that I do at the nonprofit, but I went to school and got my license so I could counsel clients. So for me, I make it work. It is a huge time commitment, and I am never not tired. I'm always ready for a nap. But my self-care, the hobbies that I have, working with making sure I have time for my family and my friends, I make sure that I'm modeling to my clients what I'm doing in my real life, because for the people that we work with, their lives are not easy typically either. So I think it's really important that the life that I want, what I want my life to look like, I'm making it happen so I can show them it's possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know others of you are balancing multiple roles as well. Is there anything to add in that regard?
I think I just real quick wanted to reiterate what Gwen said, that if you have a passion for something, it's amazing how the energy follows to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, balancing your life and putting the boundaries there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, thank you. And I know that the balance is always a challenge, I think, in all ways, but it's wonderful to have people who have done it and role models to learn from on how to create that balance and have all parts of your life honored at different times and different stages and phases that we all go through. Deborah, I wanted to jump to you for a minute, if that's all right, and ask if a student is pursuing a career path within higher ed, what recommendations do you have for them as their next step after graduation or experiences to get well in the program? Did she jump off, Betsy? Yeah, okay. We'll come back. All right, we'll come back. So how about Anna? When did you decide to pursue a PhD, and what have been the benefits so far in doing that?
Well, I haven't seen any benefits just yet. But I think that after being in private practice for so long, because I forget who said private practice can be isolating in many ways, and my motivations for being in private practice also have evolved. When I first started as a research intern, you want to put your name out there, you want to market yourself, you want to make yourself known, create a reputation in the community. And I noticed with the years that as I kept establishing that foundation for myself and that reputation becomes stronger, I started kind of getting away of the reason why I came into counseling in the first place. I was seeing a lot of private pay clients, very well off people. And I just kind of like started like really reassessing, what about the people who might not have access to pay the self-pay or doesn't have insurance? So one of my motivations to pursue my PhD, which is to maybe have an opportunity to help the individuals who might not have access, to have private counseling or therapy services. So I haven't seen any benefits just yet. So I'm hoping for them. But to be honest, I'm doing it as a personal goal, not because I'm 100% sure that I want to pursue a job in academia. It is a very tough balance. Luckily, I have a private practice where I can choose my schedule, how many hours I work, what days am I going to be available to see clients. So that definitely makes it doable. It is difficult to find that because every semester I have to change my schedule, like depending on the classes that I have or the other requirements that I had to meet. But like Milton said, when you have a passion for something, you're going to make it work and it's going to work. And I'm really blessed that I have a very supportive husband that really helps out the balancing act to manage my family responsibilities. And he also has a business, so he also understands what it is like to have a private practice, which is a business. When you have a private practice, you're an entrepreneur. So he understands that aspect as well. So he's very supportive.
Great, thank you. That's exciting, though. I'd like to hear about that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, thank you. Deborah, I see that you got on or maybe paused your journey for just a minute. So just to reiterate that question, so if a student's interested in pursuing a career path within higher ed, what recommendations do you have for them as the next step after graduation or things they could be doing while in the program? And you're muted. Oh, there we go.
There we go. I have a couple of recommendations. One is to say that you want to work in higher ed opens a huge field, right? So to give some thought to not only what you want to do, but even if you decide that you want to work in student accessibility services or something like that, to figure out where and what kind of institution. So maybe while you were in the program, to play around with working at a smaller institution or a private institution. The plus side of a smaller institution is that you get to know your students better, and the volume is typically not as high, so you have deeper relationships with your students. The downside of a smaller institution is they don't often have the resources that you need, whether that be money or technology or people. So you're talking about doing, especially with disability work, you're talking at a small school, you're very often a one-person shop. So while your pay, we've been talking about private practice, while your pay scale is not dependent on you, everything else is. If you work for a larger institution, something like USF or somewhere in between, you're probably part of a much larger team that has its good sides and its bad sides. So those are things I would look at. One of the things that I did not consider until I was well into my higher ed careers, that very often in order to move up in higher education, you do have to move. That can mean moving institutions, that can mean moving geographically, that can mean both. So if you're somebody who kind of is really familiar, needs to stay in a particular geographic area, you may want to start looking somewhere where there is more than one school, so that as you come up for promotion or have the opportunity, you have somewhere to move. We would be open. SAS has had a number of interns in your final semester from the program, and so I'd certainly welcome those opportunities, and you've got my contact information if you want to pursue that. Most higher ed jobs in terms of job titles are going to start with coordinator or practitioner, and almost all of them our master's required, if not preferred, but beyond that, you should be okay.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Those are some really, I think, good tidbits to think about when you consider, higher ed and what that means for a long-term career and movement and kind of path moving forward. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so let's see. Valerie, how do you recommend approaching clients about your therapy session rate changing, specifically after you get licensed?
Well, so if it was someone that I'm like any other change with a client, it's something you want to approach way before or as soon as you know, and you want to just begin to prepare them for that. And you want to prepare and you want to just begin to talk about it in advance, little by little, let them process it, and perhaps make it collaborative. Like if it's really uncomfortable with that for them and they can't do it, you wouldn't want to abandon them. So you would want to work with them and possibly modify it, and kind of work with the client. Just be honest and bring it up much in advance. Don't spring anything on anybody.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have something to add in that regard, or?
I guess I would just say that it's personal, like depending on the therapist. So how flexible do you want to be? You probably want to know that ahead of time. Like how open are you to like changing that number? Is it a hard and fast number? Are you willing to let the client stay at their fee if their income doesn't allow? It's very like specific to the therapist, and you kind of want to know the answer before you go in and be prepared. Like, oh, I'm only willing to take it down $30, or like, what's the lowest I can go? It's that way you're not kind of in an emotional reaction with the client. Like, oh yeah, sure, that's fine. Sure, this, no, you can't. Let's call people on your insurance panel. So also have an idea about your own like flexibility before.
Yeah.
I agree. And I also think that, maybe something to consider is if you are choosing, I mean, I guess there's so many factors that I'm thinking, like who chose your price rate? If you're choosing your price rate, then what is going to be that difference between the registered intern price to the licensure price, right? Can you maybe do something in the middle? Like for me, like when I changed my prices, even as a registered intern, my prices weren't so low that when I did the transition, I just kept my clients that I had already had at that price point, and any new clients after that, then it would be a new price rate for them. Or if maybe these clients came back for a different reason in the future, then I would say to them, well, this is my new rate. And at that point, their rate would change.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Those are all great tips for doing that. And I think some of our students may be facing that now as they consider graduation and moving from the student rate to now a registered state intern rate, and kind of what that, change is going to look like for their existing clients if they're staying on board. Thank you. So Tom, I'm going to circle back to you. A student was curious about how have you avoided burnout over your 40-year career? And if you did experience that, how have you worked on it or alleviated that over the years?
Oh, well, I have a lot of self-care that I practice over these years. Okay. For instance, I go to a group just for myself once a week. Okay. It's a nurturing group. Okay. And so it's a supportive group, and we share together, and it's wonderful. Okay. I get up every morning and I have a daily meditation and a daily prayer every single day. Okay. And I will do that also throughout the day. I'll have some quiet moments. I exercise. I eat well. I get plenty of rest. Okay. And what else do I do? I have a spiritual mother. That's the best way to put it. She's like a guide to me, and she's 92 years old now, and she's been guiding, helping me for the last 38 years. I shared with her quite a bit, okay? In fact, I go see her every Monday. We spend time together. And I tell her everything, and so she gives me a lot of suggestions and guidance, okay? I've also, over the course of the years, I've involved myself and I've received counseling myself, okay? Individual counseling, as well as my wife and I went to counseling when we were having marital problems, okay? I did that. What else here? I've made it a practice over these years to follow my heart, okay? and to move with my heart. That's something that I was not trained to do when I was in graduate school. I was trained to think mentally. I was trained to be a scholar, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that, except that my experience is that if I move with my heart, I would be more likely to take risk, okay? When I moved into private practice, it was a huge risk that I took. I was working for an agency full time, and the bottom line is I had a heart attack, and it woke me up, and my heart wasn't in that agency anymore. It was time to go, and I was putting up resistance to going, and I knew what my heart was moving me into full-time private practice. And I did that move, and it was the greatest move I ever did in my life. It just flourished and nothing flat, okay? So those are the things for me that I practice and still practice to avoid burnout. I've never been burned out, okay? So it just hasn't happened, you know, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I'm hearing kind of a balance of those self-care things that we're always, you know, preaching and telling students to do, and then trying to figure out a way to do that myself always. But a mix of that, and then also I think potentially making some career change or choices that might help prevent or alleviate burnout for some. Allie, I noticed in the chat you said, I need the answer to that question too. But I'm curious for others, you know, who have either, you know, practiced intensely in their field or have just kind of worked on that, if they have anything to add in that regard. Valerie?
In DBT, we actually rate our burnout every week. So we actually have to be aware of how it is from 1 to 10 and number it, and to know the signs of burnout. When you begin resenting your clients, you begin feeling angry. And for me, it was around the idea of you can't control, because we do phone coaching in DBT, so your clients have access to you much more than in other, you know, types of therapies. So learning how to set appropriate limits and boundaries, working within the parameters of the module, and also learning to not own, you can't own what your clients do when they go out and do things. Like when I remember I first started, I felt such a sense of ownership for all the bad decisions they made. I thought we talked about that, you know, and learning how to rent their problems without owning them for me, and learning to know that they're going to do what they do, and all I can do is what I can do within my limits. And they've been doing this stuff a long time. So just changing my relationship with my, you know, power, my control over what they ultimately do with their lives.
Yeah, thank you. Monica, I saw your hand raised a little bit ago. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, besides just piggybacking off of what Tom and Valerie both said, I think some of the things that have helped me along the way is understanding that even self-care is going to change throughout. Like the things that maybe you did at the beginning of your career to help you might change. And one of the things that my colleagues and I have talked about, and I'm sure you've all heard it, is even throughout the pandemic, like how do we do counseling and living it at the same time? And so just for ourselves, like identifying how do we continue to stay grounded Also, there are going to be times when, you know, don't be afraid to say, okay, this is what I have always dreamed about, but now maybe I'm going over here. And that might be a scary shift, but, you know, so don't be afraid to fail, and nothing is perfect. So, you know, just kind of remembering those things. And I really like, you know, what Valerie said too, is don't own your client's stuff and don't work harder than them. You know, because the minute you start doing both, you absolutely will kind of go to burnout. So, you know, don't fear change.
Thank you. Yes.
Something that really affected, like especially in the pandemic for me, was when from working remotely. I've always worked with remote clients, but like 100% remote. I didn't have a transition of like leaving my office and then getting into the house, and that was very hard for me. I'm always been pretty good at like not taking my client stuff on me, but I realized that the transition from like that drive from my office to my house was kind of like that this moment for me where it was just like, okay, I'm leaving this to enter into this new space, and not having that for me was very difficult. And even one day a client asked me, well, what are you doing it was like, you know, it was like a very savvy new person who was looking for a therapist. What are you doing to take care of yourself? And it really like shocked me, because I wasn't ready to to answer that, you know, like, what am I doing? And it took me a minute to think about what am I really doing. So I did sought counseling during the pandemic, because I thought, you know, it was very hard not to have that transition, and how important it was. And then learn to reestablish, like Monica said, you know, like as our life changes, as we evolve as practitioners, and then the time and the environment around us changes, we might have to change how we take care of ourselves and how we cope.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing that, you know, personal experience too of the pandemic and just how that impacted you. I know I went through similar things too in that physical boundary, I guess. So in the interest of time, I'm going to take, how about Gwen? I think I'll take your hand and then we'll close this topic.
I just wanted to quick point out a resource on this topic. I mentioned when I first hopped on, April is Counselor Awareness Month, designated by American Counseling Association. And today is actually Teal Day, which is a big push to supporting counselors and specifically supporting our need for preventing burnout. So it's interesting that that question came up, and today is actually the day that we're supposed to be talking about self-care and preventing burnout and working together and kind of normalizing some of the feelings that we, you know, are likely and are guaranteed actually to come across when it comes to burnout and compassion fatigue and all of those things. And I wanted to offer a resource that I'll put in the chat. Sunday, the ACA is putting on a free webinar called Beating Burnout Bootcamp. So it's just a webinar to talk about self-care and prevention of burnout. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I wasn't even aware that April was that month. So I appreciate that too. Okay, so we have another question, I think. Two more from our pre-question from the students. But one is, do you all recommend students or, you know, new clinicians start out with a more specific population? I think this is probably directed more towards the private practice providers, but starting with a specific population and specializing in that from the very beginning, or starting very broad and narrowing over time?
That's a hard question. I definitely used my practicum internship and registered internship to like be very broad, and it was like anywhere I could get couples and families. Like I remember the hunger of getting a site and like making sure that they were marital hours, and like I would do anything. I would work anywhere. Hence me ending up in a residential treatment facility. And I think that that first year is really trial and error. Like, what populations do I like and what don't I like? And really being open to things that you might not have wanted to do, you might end up liking, and vice versa. I never thought I would enjoy addiction, and I love it. But it is important to get grounded in a theory, because it can be really overwhelming depending on the kinds of populations that get thrown at you. And so I think that question's it could go either way. I do encourage people to be broad and try different kinds of populations, but once you get a handle on it, getting grounded in a specific theory and a specific niche, especially if you're interested in private practice and you're trying to navigate that or market for yourself.
I agree with Ali on this. I think that it really depends on kind of like what you're looking for to get out of it. If you already know that you love this population, then I say then just go straight to it, because that experience is going to teach you things about that population that might reinforce, that passion that you already have. Or it might say like, hey, do I really want to get and dedicate my entire career into this? So I think like it can go either way. But if you're not 100% sure, then you want to have different experiences. So then you can then discover as part of these experiences, where do you want to focus your time? So I think it really depends on the individual. Do you already have an idea of what is it that you want to specialize on? Then go for it now, because if you want to know that this is not for you, then you want to do this now early on in your career. But if you don't have an idea, then experiment with different areas, so then you can find the things that really that you really love and that you're going to be passionate about, and you can then start building that experience and that niche.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then after graduation, right, students are in the program getting the most current research, the most current treatment models and practices. How do you all, and this is for everybody and the other, not just private practitioners, but how do you stay current with the current research and treatment models for the population in the setting in which you work?
I'll go ahead and jump in with that one. I think if there's one thing that I've learned is that the more you learn about this profession, the more you realize that what you don't know, and that there's even more to learn. And so to stay motivated, and I think to help avoid burnout, that to always following your professional areas of interest to continue your training. I know just personally, even with myself after all these years for the grief and trauma work, I'm finally working on EMDR certification, and with the rehabilitation part, CRCC opened it up, or if you're a CRC, you could take a class to be a certified vocational evaluator. So I always have some learning project and interest to keep my mind sharp, to keep up on the trends, and to learn. So it's an ongoing process with that.
I agree with Milton. I think it's important to think about belonging to a professional organization that is going to help you not only network, which is another benefit of it, but stay current with developments, law changes, for example. I don't know if you guys saw the new professional counselors licensure compact law that's got signing. I mean, this kind of stuff are really like disseminated very well by professional associations. And if you didn't really belong to a part of, you wouldn't belong to one, then how else will you know? Like maybe like a few weeks from now, or who knows if you're going to have access to it. How do you get your news sources, right? Like I think it's so important to be a part of a professional organization, and there's so many benefits from it, and then it doesn't cost much. So I think that's a very smart way to stay connected to your profession, new research, new discoveries, and laws.
Thank you. And Allie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think to echo what everybody has said, I remember graduating and thinking, thank God I don't have to tape ever again or have someone critique my therapy sessions. And unfortunately, I have grown significantly tenfold in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been taping and working with a supervisor in whatever modality that you're interested in. I hate it. Like I promise it's not fun or enjoyable, but I mean, I've seen my skill level quadruple just from taping and supervision. So it's kind of like that next level, not only getting trained in something or attending trainings and CEUs and keeping that kind of project that we talked about earlier, but taking it to that next level, like really looking at your tapes, really working with other people, being a part of consultation teams where there are others that are disseminating the current research or what's going on in your model. I mean, I hate it, but it works. And so don't stop. don't give up. That's really changed and made a difference.
Great, thank you. And Betsy?
Oh yeah, just giving a time check. We've got about 8 minutes left to go.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so students, if you have any burning questions for today, like I said, our panelists are going to be available to answer questions, via their email and contact info. But feel free to ask them. And let's see, I see a hand. Who is that? Dino.
Hello, and thank you. I appreciate it. My question is going to be directed towards Mr. Moss, and it has to do with VR. So typically, I'm learning a lot of information about counseling, licensed mental health counseling, and stuff like that. And then after hearing Anna and others speak about, I know what my niche is. I am in VR myself. I'm a disabled veteran, and I want to work with disabled veterans. So when I do my practicum, they want me to practice from a specific theory. And I'm having a hard time applying that concept to what my job at the VA is going to be, which is a little bit different than what most counselors do. And do you have any insight on that? And thank you for your time.
Oh, absolutely. What my thought is with that is that, like any counselor, that we specialize in one theory and we have one direction that we go theory wise, but we're also familiar with the range of other theories. And so many times with vocational rehabilitation, you have to be very eclectic with the approaches that you take. For instance, some people, cognitive approaches to motivate them and work with them work. Other people, if they're intellectual disabilities, it's more behavioral. So you have to have a basic knowledge of the theories and to know, when to use what theory and what approach, which will work best with the individual. Because it is very fluid with vocational rehabilitation, that the range of disabilities from physical to mental health is the whole spectrum, and it's not just one size fits all.
I, just want to add to what Milton is saying, this is something that could also happen when you work for a nonprofit agency or a community agency. When I first graduated from the program, I got hired to my job position was just like therapist one, but part of my job was to facilitate dialectic behavioral therapy groups. And as part of that, I had to go through the DBT training, not because I planned to, not because I had a passion on it, but being in it to this day, I use what I've learned from my DBT training. And they have so many exercises, techniques, and skills that can help so many different clients in different ways, that even though it wasn't my passion, or I wasn't necessarily thinking that was going to be part of my plan, what I gained from that experience, it served me up until this day. And I, just love that I had that DBT training, because it kind of helps you expand, even though it might be different from your theory, the basis of your theory, the theory that you would eventually choose. You can make connections and even help describe things to your clients that are maybe framed on this different therapy that you're going through, just because you've had that experience.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Are there any other student questions? We probably have time for one more. Betsy, are there any in the chat? No?
No, I don't see any more.
Okay. I have one more maybe that we could end with. So a lot of our students are getting closer to graduation, and of course we know to register with the state you need a supervisor. So what tips and recommendations do you all have for students when they're looking for a qualified supervisor with the state to get registered intern status? Gwen.
I just want to mention I was fortunate to have an absolutely incredible supervisor. And so I guess to preface that, I had my agency assign me to a supervisor who unfortunately was not incredibly helpful. And I made the decision, it would no longer be free. I had to pay for it on my own. But I found someone who was just incredible and made all the difference. And he was really, really tough on me, similar to what Allie described with the tapes. And it was so hard and I sweat so much every week. But I just think that piece, I just recommend don't find someone just based on who's available or who's affordable or who's easy, because this is it. These 2 years, this sets you up for everything. And it's just so important to get the right person.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Any others have a tip to offer?
I agree with Gwen. I think that it's important that you do a lot of research about even the people who you are considering, and maybe like choose 2 or 3 people and then interview them, because the way that they're going to supervise is going to be based on their practice and their experience. So you want to align that as much as you want with what your own goals are, or maybe either the population that you want to work on. And, just really thinking about how can I get the most out of this experience, because you're also building a connection, you're networking with that supervisor who then maybe eventually can also be a source for clients for you if you're going to go into private practice.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like we're saying research, be willing to get somebody that you really connect with, and word of mouth. Allie, do you have something to add on that?
Sorry, I was just going to add that you can also get a secondary supervisor. So it was like I knew this person could help me with this, and that was free and at my site. But then I got a secondary person that I could manage that cost and see them every other week and get this specific type of supervision. So you can also get creative and add on a supervisor. If they're full now, they might not be full in a year. Really get creative. That would be like that last piece of information that might be helpful.
Okay. Valerie.
And just to say also, as you begin training and going to trainings, you become part of a community. There's all these communities of people out there, all trying to learn and passionate about what it is you're beginning to think you might like. And through that, doors open, which open other doors, and people know people. And, so it all kind of ties together.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of that is through networking and word of mouth and getting connected, in various circles, and knowing that you can add a supervisor later, right? You don't have to stay with the same one all the way through those 2 years. Okay, great. So we had one final question in the chat about licensing exam, and it looks like the verdict is maybe a bit mixed. I'd have to filter through, but do you all recommend sitting immediately after graduation for your licensure exam, or waiting a little bit to get experience, or waiting till the end of your registered internship? And Allie, I'll just paraphrase what you said, but to wait perhaps about 6 months to get some experience under your belt, to learn more about the laws and rules, documenting, etc. And Gwen, it looks like you agreed with that, as well as waiting a little bit. Do we have any other opinions in that regard?
I do have an opinion. I think that the 2 exams are so different. If you are going for the mental health counseling exam, I would say definitely you want to wait, because a lot of those questions are practice-based. But if you're going for the MFT exam, I would say get that in sooner than later, because there is a lot of theory and there's a lot of content information in that exam that you want to have a fresh context, right? Like if you wait, you're going to have to study all over again, versus you just got done with school. You were just looking at these theories now. So I think that the 2 exams are very different. So MFT, wait it out. I'm sorry, LMHC, wait it out. MFT, do it soon.
Okay.
Do not sell your Ryan Henry's book for Dynamics of Marriage and Family Therapy. Just reread that book for the LMFT exam. Do not do anything. Do not sign up for anything. Just like reread the theories and you will pass.
Okay, good. Thank you for that very specific tip, Allie. Okay, so I know we said we would end right on time, but we're a minute over. And I do sadly have to say we'll probably disbar at this time, but we appreciate all of our panelists being here today very, very much. We know how busy you all are, and you all being available to our students, not only for this hour, but also putting your contact information out there for them to contact you later with any specifics, is just really valuable. So we are grateful for your partnership in that regard. And with that, I don't know, Betsy, do you have any other parting words? Okay.
No, just big thank you.
Yes. Thank you all very much. I'm always a clapper. I miss in person. Yay! Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful day.
You too.
You
Bye.
too. So good seeing everyone. Thank you.
Yes,
Good
nice
seeing
to meet you.
everybody.